Hi, I'm Jerry Matthews, and I'm standing on the 10th tee at Cutter's Ridge golf course outside of Manistee, Michigan, that I had the pleasure to design. And we would like you to see this course today, but first a little overview. We had limited acreage to do this, but the acreage is beautiful. We're on the west side of Michigan, right close to Lake Michigan, a lot of hills, a lot of valleys, some wetlands, greatly vegetated with oaks and maples and birch and conifers. So it's a great site, and I think you're going to like what you're going to see today. Okay, hole number 3 here at Cutter's Ridge typifies what we found on this site. It's a nicely wooded site with all types of vegetation, but the mixture of evergreens and deciduous trees. But this hole signifies what we like to find. If we see it early, we design around it, but in this particular case, we came across this big cherry tree on the left side of this hole and built the hole a slight dogleg around it. So this tree is the signature visual part of this hole and makes the dogleg work. From the 150-yard mark where we're sitting, it shows also a slight a wetland area across this fairway, which is common on this golf course. But it also goes into a pretty well protected green with mounds left and right with sand on the right. But the approach to this green and the opening into the green is really quite opening and quite inviting. On hole number 5 on the approach to the green is a good example of what we're trying to do here, particularly in northern Michigan. I love to work in northern Michigan because we have so many beautiful golf sites and such beautiful vegetation mixed with wetlands and high grounds, and we've got our fair share of wetlands on this project. But if we can create settings like this one, where you have the green elevated somewhat, protected by mounds, we got sand each side with the bunker on the left here, about 100 feet out from the green. But the signature thing here is that the big white pine that we left, which is relatively close to the green, but it gives this hole its own identity, and I think each hole somehow should have its own identity and how it plays and how it looks. And that white pine does this on this particular hole, and it makes truly a great up north golf hole. The 7th hole here at Cutter's Ridge really typifies what we had to try and accomplish from a big picture. We didn't have a lot of acreage when you consider that about 30 to 35% of this site was wetlands that we were not to intrude on. So we had to work with what was here, and this hole typifies a tee shot. We've got elevated tees all right, and it goes out to a very large friendly landing area off the tee. So we put a bunker out on the left just to define the left side of the fairway. We're now on the landing area out about 280 off the back tee, and you can see that we now have another wetlands to cross with our approach shot. For the average golfer, this is not too difficult, but you do have to get up into this area. But the green setting is really beautiful. There's a natural bank back there. We've got a sand bunker in back to frame it, and a small one on the right. But the essence of this golf hole is the 2 shots over wetland. The 9th hole is a 415-yard par 4 with a slight marsh on the left, but a very wide landing area framed by a ridge on the right side to contain shots with an accent bunker right straight out at about 300 yards to make it a target. But there's a lot of room out there, even though it looks a little intimidating off the tee. It truly is a very wide fairway and accepts shots very well, particularly if you play it straight or slightly to the right, and they'll come back in. From 150 yards in, it's a relatively open shot. The little neck of wetland sticking out in there, but the green side is very open, very inviting. No bunkers in front, just some off to the right to frame the hole, and the trees in the background and the spruce trees give it a nice framework, and it again shows the mix of deciduous and evergreen trees that are native to this site, and this is a very pretty setting for the 9th green. Hole number 12 is a nice par 3, a natural setting with a little pond on the left side. It's a good test of golf. It's 209 yards from the back tee, which is very elevated against above the green. But there's a lot of fairway to play it safe. But it becomes very reachable from the forward tee and the middle tee. But it's a perched tabletop green, so it really calls for a relatively demanding tee shot. There's not a lot of land around the green to come in on, but it is a very challenging par 3, and it's quite fair because there's a lot of room up around the green that doesn't particularly show from the tees, but there's a lot of landing area, and it's a very challenging par 3, one of the best that is out here at Cutter's Ridge. The 13th hole here at Cutter's Ridge, I think, is one of the better par 4s we have. We have ample teeing space. It's a 369-yard hole from the back, and elevated tees with ample teeing space, and a big semi-isolated landing area, which is very generous. A lot of room out there to hit a golf ball. The second shot then takes about 150 or 60-yard shot over some wetlands to a very large, welcoming green with very little bunkering. A hole like this doesn't need a lot of bunkering. We had to do very little earthwork to make this work. The hills flow in from the left and the right, so it's pretty well framed, and the part of the holes that don't have the landforms to help frame it in is certainly aligned with the hemlocks and pines and hardwoods that are so typical on this site. And I think it really came out well, and it shows what you can do if you work hard to work with nature and with wetlands and with landforms to make really great golf holes. 16th hole is slightly different from a number of the holes here at Cutter's Ridge. It's a relatively short par 5 at 501 yards. But it's nestled into a little valley that was just sitting here waiting to be a golf hole. Ridges on both sides, tree-lined on both sides. So basically we flattened out 2 ridges to create the tee sites, and just more or less leveled the valley floor to make it an acceptable fairway. And it's just one of the prettier holes here. It's more typical up north golf than we have at a lot of the holes here, and the look is just a little more straightforward for a golf hole. Very little sand, but the hole is well defined with the trees and the landforms. The 18th hole here at Cutter's Ridge, I think, is another great example. There's a number of them on this golf course. Another great example of what you can do with a natural site. We had to do a fair amount of earthwork. You can see the left side is a pretty steep bank, and it goes up to the trees, and that's out of bounds. And the wetland area on the right is, of course, has to stay there untouched. On the second shot on the 18th hole here at Cutter's Ridge, you can see from the landing area here, for out here about 250. It's about 160, 150 yards in, depending on where you are. But the green site is really neatly framed. It's in an amphitheater of natural embankment with sand bunkers in back, just to outline it. No sand in front. It's a relatively skinny approach, and the green is laying perpendicular to the hole. I think it's a great finish hole for this golf course. It has a little bit of everything. It has a lot of high ground. It has some wetlands. It has some wide open areas, and it has some very relatively tight areas. Well, I hope you enjoyed what you saw today of our tour of Cutter's Ridge. It's a beautiful golf course. It can be a target golf course, but I think it's one you're going to really like to see, and I hope you enjoyed the tour today.